Can you see the video now?
Yes, sir.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning, yeah.
Sir.
Good morning to all the participants for the second day FGP sponsored by AICTE, organized by the Department of Biotechnology, the Oxford College of Engineering. Today's session, we have our guest speaker, Dr. Dinesh A. Nagegowda. He is a principal scientist and professor at ACSIR, scientist in charge, CSIR, Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants, Research Center, Bangalore. Sir's educational qualification includes PhD in plant molecular biology from University of Hong Kong. Sir holds a MSc in biotechnology from University of Agricultural Science. Currently, he holds the post of Senior Principal Scientist at CSIR CMAP Research Center, Bangalore. His significant contributions in the areas of genomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, and biotechnology related to medicinal and aromatic plants. His research has led to identification of genes from various maps involved in the biosynthesis and regulation of commercially and medicinally important plants' specialized metabolites. By adapting these research findings, maps can now be improved to yield high biomass and target metabolites, which can bring high returns to the farmers growing these crops. Dr. Dinesh has not only presented his research findings in national and international conferences, but also has published his work in reputed and top journals of the world, including Plant Cell, PNAS USA, Plant Journal, Molecular Plants, New Phytologists, and Plant Biotechnology journals. In recognition of his contribution, Dr. Dinesh has been awarded the prestigious Ramalinga Swamy Fellowship of Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, Raman Research Fellowship of CSIR, and Indo-US Get-in Overseas Fellowship. Sir has around 40 publications to his credit with a cumulative impact factor of 170 and an average impact factor of about 4.85. He has around 5 books to his credits as a corresponding as well as first author. There is a list of fellowships and awards which he has received from various organizations. He has visited quite a few countries and has also delivered lectures and invited talks in various conferences and symposiums. As an organizing secretary and convener, he has organized and conducted an international virtual conference on plant specialized metabolism and metabolic engineering, PSMN 2020, where about 35 invited speakers from 14 different countries and 18 different foreign countries have presented their talks. This event was first of a kind conducted virtually in such a large scale. Sir has also contributed in various training and certificate programs. He holds a membership in Society of Biological Chemists, Canadian Society of Plant Biologists, American Society of Plant Biologists, Phytochemical Society of North America. He is also a member of professionally recognized societies. He has guided various students as a PhD supervisor, has also guided MSc projects and postdoctorals. Sir, on behalf of the Department of Biotechnology, the Oxford College of Engineering, we are very delighted to have you as our speaker for today's session, sir. I now request Dr. B.K. Manjunath, convener of this FDP program, to speak a few words.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good morning to Dr. Dinesh, who accepted our invitation to deliver his talk on this second phase of FDP. Dear participants, Dr. Dinesh is very good resource for you people. He is there in CMAP, where you can go and interact with him for various projects. You can send your students for internship, and I am fortunate and lucky and proud to say that many of our students have done projects in CMAP under his able guidance. And one of my students is also working as SRF in his institute. You people can approach them at any point. They are very kind and they are very helpful. And as a person, he is very good human being. So he will support you in each and everything. Please make use of this opportunity because AICT is giving you a good opportunity to interact with eminent scientists like Dr. Dinesh. You can ask him and you can approach him and you can make use of this platform. Okay, Dr. Dinesh, over to you now. You can start your presentation, sir.
Thank you, madam, and thank you, Dr. Manjunath, for your kind introduction. And as you said, like the participants can always approach us for any kind of training or even internship in our institute. So if there is vacancy, we will definitely try to accommodate you people. So I think I'll request you to make me a presenter because I'm not able to upload my presentation.
So you are now presenter. You can present.
Yeah, I can do that now. So I hope all of you can see the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So very good morning again to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Manjunath, for inviting me to deliver a talk in this program. So I suppose most of you are faculties, and I think some students are also there. So the title of my talk is Plant Specialized Metabolism and its Engineering for Commercial Production of High Value Metabolites. Before I go into the details of my talk, I'll just briefly tell about my workplace. So I belong to Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants, and it is headquartered at Lucknow. This institute is one of the 39 constituent laboratories of Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, which comes under Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India. And this institute was started in the year 1959. And it has, in addition to its headquarters at Lucknow, it has 4 research centers, which are located in different parts of the country. So I am at Bangalore Center. We also have Hyderabad Center and Pantnagar and Purara, which are in Uttarakhand. So our institute is got a unique distinction as one of the only few institutes in the world which is dealing with entirely on the study of medicinal and aromatic plants. And in our institute, we have been steering multidisciplinary research in biological and chemical sciences, and also extending technologies and services to the farmers and entrepreneurs of medicinal and aromatic plants. So we actually connect directly from lab to land, where like we connect to the farmers, and lab to industry, we connect to the industry and entrepreneurs, and also we are involved in indirectly connecting farmers and industry. So from lab to land, like how we are connected is like we are always involved in providing planting material, quality planting material and agro technologies to the farmers, so that they can grow the medicinal and aromatic plants in their farms, and so that they also can earn better income. And also from lab to industry, our institute is also involved in generating different processing technologies, production technologies, and also extraction technologies, so that the industry can be benefited using these technologies. So indirectly, like we are involved in connecting the farmers and industry people, like our farmers using our high quality planting material and agro technology, they grow the quality raw material like herbs and essential oil, and also value added products. So they in turn are procured by the industry. So industry is in turn benefited by this. So this is briefly about the activities of CMAP. So coming to the outline of my talk, it is divided into 4 parts. First, I'll talk about the introduction on the biosynthesis of specialized metabolites. And then I'll cover some of the strategies for metabolic engineering or synthetic biology strategies for production of secondary metabolites. And also, I'll provide some of the successful examples of metabolic engineering of secondary metabolites in different host systems. And finally, I'll cover some of the work that we have done in our lab towards pathway understanding and metabolic engineering of secondary metabolites in some of the medicinal and aromatic plants. So what are medicinal and aromatic plants? So they are nothing but economically important plants with one or more known medicinal and aromatic properties, which can be attributed to the presence of certain metabolites called as secondary or specialized metabolites. So how are these secondary metabolites formed in the plant? So I think most of you know that plant metabolism is broadly categorized into primary metabolism and secondary metabolism. As the name itself indicates, primary metabolism is very much required for the survival of the plant. It is required for the growth, respiration, storage, reproduction. Whereas secondary metabolism is also called as specialized metabolism, is a term for pathways that produce small molecule products that are not absolutely required for the survival of the organism. So if these secondary metabolites are not produced, then plant can survive, but it reduces the fitness. So these secondary metabolites are involved in providing the overall fitness to the plant to like for different challenges to defend against various factors. So they function in defense, as I said, against herbivores, microbes, viruses, and competing plants. So in herbivores, it can involve insects, mollusks, vertebrates. So they are involved in repellents, deterrence, toxicity, or even growth inhibition. And secondary metabolites are also involved in defense against microbes, viruses, which can like involve viruses, bacteria, fungi. So they are involved in inhibiting these microbes, and also they are involved in giving toxicity effect to the growth of these microbes. And these secondary metabolites, they are also involved in defense against competing plants by inhibiting the germination and growth of seedlings. In addition to the defense, they are also involved in providing, attracting the pollinators, seed dispersing animals, root nodule bacteria, and also specialist herbivores, which are like predators of the herbivores. These secondary metabolites are also known to provide protection against UV, and also they are involved in nitrogen storage. So far, about more than 200,000 secondary metabolites have been reported. However, the real number is certainly much higher because only few percentage of plants have been investigated so far. So besides their role in providing the overall fitness to the plants, these secondary metabolites have immense value to humans as medicines. So you can see from here, like we have artemisinin and quinine, which are anti-malarial drugs. These are derived from Artemisia annua and cinchona, respectively. And we have anti-cancer drugs, vinblastine, derived from Catharanthus roseus, also called as periwinkle. And we have Taxol, derived from Taxus brevifolia. Similarly, we have digoxin, which is derived from Digitalis purpurea, which is used in the treatment of various heart disorders. And we have morphine derived from poppy, botanically called as Papaver somniferum. This is used as a sedative. So more than half of the 150 most prescribed medicines in the world have at least one compound derived from plants. So this shows the immense value of these secondary metabolites in providing the medicinal value to the well-being of the humans. So in addition to the medicinal properties, these secondary or specialized metabolites also have aromatic value. So here you can see various products which are used in day-to-day basis by all of us. So you have scented candles, you have perfumes, you have insect repellents, like that you have various aromatic compounds used in different industries, like for flavors. And also these aromatic compounds are used in aromatherapy, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide, and it is picking up rapidly in India also. So these secondary metabolites, especially the natural ones, have immense value in this aroma industry also. So these are some of the plants, medicinal and aromatic plants, which our institute has been working, and I just mentioned few of them. Here we have ashwagandha, which is known to produce ethanolides, and we have centella. It is in Kannada, it is called as ondelaga. It is also having triterpene specialized metabolites called as acetosides and centellosides. And we have sarpagandha, which produces serpentine. Mentha, I think most of you have tasted mentha, pudina. It produces menthol. And we have lemongrass, which produces citral. Likewise, we have like curry leaf, which produces sabinein. So these are some of the important medicinal and aromatic herbs which we are working in our institute. So these secondary or specialized metabolites are categorized into 3 chemically distinct groups. So they are terpenes. Terpenes have they are the largest class of secondary metabolites. So they are comprising of monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, diterpenes, triterpenes, tetraterpenes, polyterpenes, and also hemiterpenes. And these terpenes are again subclassified based on the number of carbon units present in their chemical structure. So monoterpenes will have C10, sesquiterpenes C15, diterpenes C20, tri30, tetra 40, like that. So the second largest class belongs to the phenolics, and phenolics comprises of flavonoids, isoflavonoids, coumarins, anthocyanins, and so on. And the third group of compounds is nitrogen or sulfur containing compounds, which comprise of alkaloids, indoles, glucosinolates, isothiocyanates, and so on. So this is a broad category or classification of plant secondary metabolites. So how are these formed in the plants? So I think most of you know or have studied primary metabolism. So there are different primary metabolic pathways in the plant, like photosynthesis, glycolysis, citric acid cycle, shikimate pathway, Dox pathway, and so on. So these primary metabolic pathways lead to a formation of pool of metabolites. So these pool of metabolites further undergo secondary transformations involving ligation and cyclization. So this results in a formation of a core set of molecules called as molecular starters. So these molecular starters already by themselves can be secondary metabolites like alkaloids, phenylpropanoids, terpenoids, and so on, or they can further undergo modification involving various biochemical reactions like glycosylation, methylation, acylation, and so on. So leading to a vast array of secondary metabolites. So with more complex structures. So as I mentioned earlier, already we have identified more than 200,000 plant-derived natural products. So as I mentioned, these secondary metabolites are formed from the primary metabolic pathways. For example, here we have polyacetylenes, which are derived from fatty acid metabolism. Likewise, we have isoprenoids and polyketates, which are derived from sugar metabolism. And we have phenylpropanoids, alkaloids, glucosinolates, lignans, coumarins. They are all derived from amino acid metabolism. And some of the secondary metabolites, like you can see here, flavonoids and stilbenes, they are formed by the condensation of precursor from 2 different primary metabolic pathways. For example, here they are formed by the condensation of intermediate from sugar metabolism as well as amino acid metabolism. So thereby making the structure more complex and diverse. So the biosynthesis of these secondary metabolites is compartmentalized within the cell. So most of the secondary metabolites are formed in the cytosol. However, they are also known to be formed in endoplasmic reticulum, chloroplast, mitochondria, vesicles, and also even in vacuole. And formation of these secondary metabolites is energy consuming, and also the transport of these secondary metabolites between the cellular compartments is carried out through passive transport, or it can involve active transport involving the transporters, different transporters. And these secondary metabolites, as such, they are toxic to the cell, plant cell. So the plants have evolved a mechanism where they store in a particular or specialized structures. So hydrophilic secondary metabolites are generally stored in vacuoles, latticipers, or apoplast or cell walls, whereas lipophilic secondary metabolites are known to be stored in cuticle, trichome, resin ducts, latticipers, oil cells, and plastid membranes. And how is this secondary metabolism evolved in the plants? So first, like over the course of evolution, plant genomes have undergone duplication, mutation, selection, specialization, leading to the evolution of particular secondary metabolism in particular species. Likewise, during the early evolution, plants also have acquired genomes from probacteria, that is mitochondria, and from cyanobacteria, that is chloroplast. So this also has led to evolution of various secondary metabolisms, and also the involvement of symbiotic fungi like endophytes and ectomycorrhizal fungi as well as bacteria. It has led to plants have acquired secondary metabolism via this association of symbiotic fungi, endophytes, and ectomycorrhiza. And in some species, it is also reported that plants have acquired the secondary metabolism where they use the precursor from this association and also precursor from its own pathway, thereby making much higher complex secondary metabolites. So specialized metabolites in plants are produced in small quantities, unlike primary metabolites, which are produced in all the plants and they are ubiquitous in nature. These secondary metabolites are produced only in particular species or in response to particular stress. So, as I said, they are species specific. Not all the plants produce all the secondary metabolites. Only they are restricted to certain species. So, for example, some alkaloids like monoterpene indole alkaloids are restricted to Apocynaceae family, whereas other type of alkaloids like morphine and all that, they are all produced in different species or different family. So, and also these secondary metabolites are specific to particular tissues. So they are not produced in all the tissues. They may be specific to fruit tissue or flower tissue, leaf tissue, or root tissue. And also they are stage specific. So the plants does not produce the secondary metabolites in all the time. So they may be producing only in a particular stage of the plant, maybe during flowering or during growth stage or during fruiting or even germination stage. And also they are produced in response to particular stress, whether it can be biotic stress or abiotic stress. Because of this transient nature of the secondary metabolite production, they are produced in small quantities and their extraction is very expensive. So this limitation of extraction can be overcome to very maximum extent by metabolic engineering strategies, either in cell culture or hairy root cultures or even in the whole plant level. So this can be achieved only when we know a proper understanding of different pathway steps, committed or rate limiting steps, or regulatory factors. So the pathway can be simpler, especially in aromatic compounds, the pathway is simpler, whereas in medicinal compounds, pathway is much complex. So it can involve various branches in the pathway. So one has to have a proper understanding of different steps in the pathway and different branches of the pathway and different committed or rate limiting steps, and also different regulatory factors such as transition factors and so on. So once we know the cell cultures or whole plant can be metabolically engineered to produce high amounts of the target metabolite. Suppose if we know the entire pathway starting from precursor to the end product, and we have the genes for all the pathway, that can be synthetically, the pathway can be transformed into microbes like E. coli or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is yeast, or even to other heterologous plants, so that we can achieve maximum production of the secondary metabolites continuously. So what is metabolic engineering? So it is referred to as the directed improvement of cellular properties through the modification of specific biochemical reaction or reactions, or the introduction of new ones with the use of course, recombinant DNA technology. So before going to the different strategies, I'll just show you how the biology has evolved over the last several years. So first we had biology, where it involved the study of morphology, physiology, anatomy, behavior, and so on. Then came genetics, which involved the study of genes, genetic variation, and heredity in living organisms. And later we have molecular biology came into existence, and in which we studied interactions between the various systems of a cell, and also study of DNA, RNA, and protein biosynthesis involved in this molecular biology. Then came systems biology, where it was evolved to understand natural biological systems as a whole and use simulation and modeling tools in comparison with the experimental information. And lately, we have synthetic biology, where you can design and build novel and artificial biological parts, organisms, devices, and systems that will benefit the environment, society, and economy. So I'm giving the example of yeast cell factory. So there is a slight difference between metabolic engineering and synthetic biology, which I want to tell you here. So here, a naturally producing yeast is selected as a cell factory for production of desirable product. So we have a yeast which already is producing target metabolite. So that is kind of improved. The strain is improved so that the target metabolite, which is already produced in the yeast, can be overproduced. And here, like in the second stage, we have a pathway already existing in the yeast, and we introduce a kind of a branch point to the existing pathway, so that we achieve the production of target molecule. And in the third stage, like we do not have any pathway in the yeast, so we entirely introduce the entire biosynthetic pathway cassette into the yeast, and we achieve the target production of target product. So here you can see that this is metabolic engineering, and this is partly metabolic engineering and partly synthetic biology, because you are introducing a new branch in the pathway. And this is entirely a synthetic biology approach, where you are putting entirely new set of genes into a host organism. So this, I have given an example of yeast, but the same thing applies to either E. coli or plant. So I hope you understood the difference between synthetic biology and metabolic engineering. There are different strategies in metabolic engineering. So the first strategy is to increase the enzyme activity of rate limiting steps. So for example, you have a pathway here, and we have a target molecule C. So this is the secondary metabolite of our interest. So we want to enhance the production of this. And we know, after understanding the pathway, we know that the conversion of B to C is a rate limiting step here. So how we can increase the production of C? So we can overexpress this particular step. I mean, step in the sense you can overexpress the gene, so that there is much higher conversion of B to C, so that we have higher production of target molecule C. So modification of the activity of enzymes implicated in rate limiting steps in the target pathway by modulation of one or two key enzymes or multiple enzymes. So this can be like I've just shown the example of one distinct step. Here it can be more than one also. So in the second strategy, this is like we can increase the upstream precursors for production of target molecule. Here again you have a pathway and here you have a target molecule C, and here we know that the first committed step in the pathway, this is the first committed step in the pathway, and this is not highly expressed. So here also what you can do is you can overexpress this particular step so that we have higher production of substrate, initial substrate A, which leads to increased accumulation of B, thereby increased accumulation of target specialized metabolite C. So upstream precursors enhancement by increasing flux through the pathway by overexpressing the enzyme or enzymes that catalyze the first committed step of the pathway. In this third strategy, it involves downregulating or blocking metabolic flux of pathway. So it is also called as rechanneling by silencing. So here you have a pathway, and we have again a target molecule C, and in some of the extraction, for example, in menthol, menthol is a desirable compound, whereas menthofuran is not desirable. But when you extract menthol, you will get both. So, but the industry does not require menthofuran. So in that case, so here you can take this as a menthol and this is menthofuran. So we don't want this. So what we can do is we can block the particular step or silence the particular gene involved in conversion of C to D. Thereby we reduce this undesirable compound, and automatically when you block this, there will be a more accumulation of the target molecule C. And another strategy is redirecting common precursors. Here you have again a pathway where you have there is a branching of the pathway from C, and here our target molecule is E. And how do we increase the production of E? Again, we do not want D here. So what we can do is we silence this particular step so that we have reduced accumulation of D, thereby increasing the accumulation of C. So when there is increased accumulation of C, which is the precursor for E, automatically there will be increased production of target molecule E. In addition, we can also introduce one more step here. We can overexpress this particular step so that we can efficiently utilize the overaccumulated substrate to so that you can convert it to the target secondary metabolite. So another strategy people use is use of master regulators, which is use of transition factors. I think all of you know that transcription factors are the enzymes or proteins which affect the expression of particular gene by binding it to the promoters of the target genes. So these transcription factors are known to affect one step or multiple steps of a pathway. So people, when they know that the transition factor can affect the pathway, they can use the particular transition factor to upregulate the genes in the pathway so that you have a higher production of target molecules. Or it can, some transition factors also known to affect most of the biosynthetic pathway so that you can achieve higher production of target molecules. And people also use targeting of pathways to different cellular compartments. So for example, here the terpenoid pathway is located in both cytosol and plastid. There are two independent pathways which are operating in cytosol and plastid. So, and it is known that the precursor flux in the cytosol is less than the precursor flux provided in the plastidyl pathway. So what people did was, like, they took the pathway from the cytosol, they inserted into the plastid where we have higher flux of the substrate, so that there is higher accumulation of target molecule in the plastid. As I mentioned earlier, if we know the entire biosynthetic pathway from a particular plant, and that can be through synthetic biology approach, can be introduced into microbes like E. coli or yeast, or it can be introduced into heterologous plants like mostly people use tobacco. So that you can have higher biomass, and also here the turnover will be very fast. Within 2-3 days, you can produce the target molecule, rather than depending on 6 months or to 8 months to produce the target molecule. And in some cases, it may be even years to many years to achieve the production of target molecule. For example, in sandalwood, it takes almost 16 to 20 years to produce the sandalwood oil. So if you introduce the pathway into the yeast, it can be produced in 2-3 days time. So that was about different strategies, and I'll now briefly cover about the different platforms used for metabolic engineering. So we have 3 different platforms. It can be homologous platforms where gene or genes of a pathway are overexpressed or silenced in the host system itself. And we have heterologous plants where genes of a pathway or entire pathway are overexpressed in another plant species. For example, we can take genes from Artemisia annua and put it into tobacco to produce artemisinin in tobacco so which produces much higher biomass, and also has a fast growth compared to the Artemisia annua. And we have heterologous microbes. So here genes of a pathway or entire pathway are overexpressed in a microbe. Mostly E. coli and yeast are generally used for used as production platforms. So I'll give some examples of engineering in homologous system. So here we have Mentha. So this is one of the first examples where the engineers, researchers engineered the pathway. Mentha, this is mint, Mentha piperetta. So I mentioned already that in mint, menthol is the secondary metabolite used, and mentha oil produces both menthofuran and menthol, and it is not desirable by the industry. So what they did was they studied the pathway, and of course this was one of the first pathways to be deciphered in the plant system for especially monoterpene production. So this involves almost 8 to 9 different steps leading to formation of menthol, starting from geranyl diphosphate. So they characterize all the steps, and they biochemically characterize this particular step also, which is menthofuran synthase, which is working in the endoplasmic reticulum. With this converts pulegon to menthofuran, whereas pulegon is also a substrate for menthone, which is subsequently converted to menthol, which is the desirable product here. So what they did was they silenced this menthofuran synthase by RNA silencing, and when they did that, they could achieve 50% less menthofuran than the wild type. Further, they wanted to increase the production of menthol, that is target molecule. So what they did was they overexpressed the deoxyxylulose synthase, which is in the initial steps of the pathway. So or else you can call it as a committed step of the pathway. So when they overexpressed it, they achieved 50% more menthol with 50% less menthofuran than wild type. So this was one of the first successful example of homologous engineering in a medicinal or aromatic plant. And then we have Artemisia annua, and this is the only source of artemisinin which produces this molecule. This is a anti-malarial drug. So this molecule was isolated by Dr. Yu Tu in the year 1972, because this there was a mention in the Chinese text, ancient text, that this herb is used for the treatment of malaria. So, but they did not know what exactly is the one which is giving the protection. So she did a lot of experiments, and finally she isolated this pure molecule artemisinin from this plant and showed that this is the one which is involved in giving protection against the malaria parasite. And like in the year 2015, almost after 40 years, she was awarded Nobel Prize in the year 2015 for her work on the isolation of artemisinin. So here, so this malaria is a big problem in developing countries as well as in African countries, where there are a lot of mosquito problem. So to supply, I mean, it is difficult to supply to the entire world with the existing germplasm, because the production is less. So Chinese researchers in Shanghai, what they did was they again studied the entire pathway, and they found that these particular 3 steps, that is HMGR in the starting of the pathway, and FPP synthase in the middle of the pathway, and DPR2 at the end of the pathway. This is the pathway leading to production of artemisinin. These 3 steps, they are very important steps for production of this molecule. So what they did was they overexpressed these 3 steps, and they confirmed the overexpression, and these are the different lines overexpressing these 3 genes, and they could achieve almost 3.2% or 3.2 fold increase in the production of artemisinin in these transgenic plants. So, and now lately I have come across paper where they have achieved almost 6-fold increase in the transgenic plants, and these transgenic plants are being grown in the Madagascar, which is in Africa, because in China they do not allow growing of transgenic plants, so they are growing it in Madagascar and in large scale, and they are producing this artemisinin to supply into African countries. So those are the 2 successful examples of homologous engineering. Of course, there are many more, but I will move on to heterologous engineering in plants. So here, this is one of the classical example of heterologous engineering. I think all of you have heard of golden rice. So rice endosperm has the pathway for beta carotene, but there is a block in the beginning, which is in like the conversion of GGPP to phytoin. This particular gene is mutated in rice. So because of that, you do not see keratin production in the rice. So once the scientists realized this, what they did was they took a phytoin synthase from daffodil, which is a flower which produces carotenoids in its flower. So they characterized that phytoin synthase from daffodil, and they introduced that phytoin synthase into rice. So this, when they introduced this particular step, they could see formation of beta carotene. However, this was not sufficient to, compared to the white, this was not sufficient production. So they further studied, and they found that this daffodil phytoin synthase is not so efficient in conversion of GGPP to phytoin. Then they characterized another phytoin synthase from maize, which was much efficient in converting GGPP to phytoin. And here, when they introduced phytoin synthase, they could achieve much higher production of carotenoids. So they called it as golden rice 1 and golden rice 2, first generation and second generation. And very recently, another Chinese group, they have further engineered this pathway, where they introduced 2 more steps, beta carotene hydroxylase and beta carotene ketolase, which converts carotene to zeaxanthin and astaxanthin respectively. And this has much more higher nutritional value compared to only beta carotene. So they called it as A-star rice. And here you can see that rice grains have turned almost like orange color. And when they compared the nutritional value with the wild type and golden rice, they had much higher nutrition value compared to these two. Similarly, this particular pathway has been engineered in many vegetable crops. In tomato also, if you see, tomato produces lycopene. But when they introduced this lycopene cyclase from daffodil, the tomato turned into orange color, which is producing beta carotene. Similarly, it was tried out in cauliflower, potato, carrot, canola, and maize. Here also you can see that there is higher accumulation of beta carotene in the engineered plants. So another example of heterologous engineering is introduction of geraniol synthase. Excuse me. Geraniol synthase from Ocimum basilicum. Ocimum basilicum is a sweet basil. So here the scientists characterize geraniol synthase. Geraniol synthase is terpene synthase which converts GPP to geraniol. Geraniol is a monoterpene which provides sweet smell actually. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to introduce this gene so that the tomato flavor can be improved. So they did introduce this gene in the under the control of fruit-specific promoter, polygalactolinase promoter. So when they introduced this gene, fruit-specific under the control of fruit-specific promoter, they saw the production of geraniol, but in addition, they also saw the production of various derivatives of geraniol. And these transgenic fruits, when they did the sensory analysis using different populations, they could see that people preferred the transgenic plants over wild type, like in terms of smell, retronasal aroma, and preference. There was much preference to the transgenic fruits because there was higher flavor compared to the control. And since the target was production of geraniol and they saw production of various other derivatives of geraniol, they further studied and found that the steps involved in conversion of these molecules are present in the fruit, but there is a block in this particular conversion of GPP to geraniol. So they called these steps as silent metabolism. And when you activate this particular step, all the other enzymes got activated and there was a production of the derivatives of geraniol. So they called it as a silent metabolism. And we have another example where they targeted the production of pacholal from pacholi is a plant which produces pacholal, which is a very high value sesquiterpene and used in the most of the base notes of the perfumes. And the actually production of this molecule from this plant is very low. So what they did was they isolated this particular gene involved in conversion of FPP to pacholal, and they engineered the tobacco plants. So here they did two types of engineering. One is cytosolic engineering, where they introduced the FPP synthase, which is a precursor for the pacholal, and also pacholal synthase. And when they did that, these are the different transgenic lines, and they could achieve maximum of about 10 microgram per gram of fresh white of tobacco leaves. When they introduced the same pathway into the plastids, here you can see there was much higher production, almost 3 times much higher production than the cytosolic engineering. So here also they could demonstrate that engineering a cytosolic pathway in a plastid where there is higher flux of precursor can enhance the production of target molecules. Very recently, our researchers from our Indian institute, one of the Indian institute in Delhi, they did a different strategy where they introduced the myelinate pathway genes from yeast, and this was integrated into the chloroplast genome of the tobacco, and then artemisinin pathway from Artemisia annua into the nuclear genome of the plant. So this resulted in high production of artemisinin, and when they fed the crude extract of this tobacco to the infected mice, malaria was cured. So this is another example where you can utilize engineering strategy to alleviate the different diseases. So this is another classical example where use of transition factors for production of secondary metabolites. So in Snapdragon, this is a ornamental flower, produces a lot of anthocyanins, and this is shown that it is shown that transition factors DEL and R1, ROS1, they are involved in regulating the entire biosynthetic pathway involved in the production of anthocyanins. So they took these two genes and using a fruit specific promoter, they introduced into tomato. And you can see that the red lycopene rich tomatoes, when they were introduced with this DEL and ROS1, the tomatoes turned into purple color rich in anthocyanins. This is, you can see that this is GCMS chromatogram showing high accumulation of anthocyanins in the transgenic plants compared to the wild type. And this was also like when they did the nutritional analysis, the nutritional value was much higher in these purple fruits compared to the wild type fruits because of high accumulation of anthocyanins. I think all of you know that wine is considered as healthy because it has a lot of resveratrol, and resveratrol has a high antioxidant activity, and this resveratrol is also produced in groundnut. So the scientists, they wanted to enhance the antioxidant activities, antioxidant properties of these crops. They introduced this particular gene into wheat, tomato, and kiwi fruit. And here also they could achieve high accumulation of this resveratrol, having high antioxidant activities compared to the wild type. So all the examples which I gave earlier, like where metabolic engineering in plants, it involves generation of transgenic plants, and it is not always possible to generate transgenic plants, and also growing up transgenic plants is not so well accepted in many countries, including in India. So researchers from UK, what they did was they synthetically generated the entire pathway and introduced into Agrobacterium, and they infiltrated the tobacco leaves transiently. So it manual infiltration manual infiltration of these Agrobacterium cultures, they achieved production of almost up to 3.3 milligram per gram dry weight of amyrin, beta amyrin, which is a triterpene molecule, very highly medicinal value. This compound was produced in a matter of 4 days time. So this is the purified amyrin from the infiltrated leaves. So if one can set up a big poly house where you can put labors to infiltrate the leaves and produce a target molecule, it is possible in a shorter period of time. So this is another very good example where you can utilize the strength of metabolic engineering for production of target molecules. So Montbretia is a plant grown in African countries, and it is known to produce a particular metabolite called as montbretin A, and it is accumulated in the chromes of this plant, and and again it is very accumulated in very low quantities. And this montbretin A is a very potent molecule, antidiabetic molecule. So researchers from University of British Columbia they use transcriptomic, metabolomic, and genomic approaches to identify the pathway, and they deciphered the entire pathway, which involved 6 steps. And after deciphering the pathway, they introduced into Nicotiana benthamiana through transient approach only, as I mentioned in earlier slide. So when they did that, they could achieve much higher production of monoprotein A. So coming to heterologous engineering in microbes. So this is one of the most successfully utilized approach for production of target molecules so far. And here what they do is they take the entire pathway from the plant and introduce into either E. coli or yeast, so that they can achieve higher production of target molecule in a shorter time. So the advantages of this microbial engineering is one can have on-demand and fast production capabilities, and one can scale it and also control the production in fermentation facilities, and the capacity to produce and end products and intermediates at higher purity or yield than the native plant host. So this is the most important aspect. You can produce the target molecule in a much higher purity compared to the extraction from the plant native host. Also, microbial production of plant secondary metabolites can serve as a discovery platform to synthesize novel derivatives of plant secondary metabolites and gain insight into enzymes involved in plant secondary metabolism. So using these microbes, one can also study different aspects of secondary metabolism, and also one can target to produce non-natural secondary metabolites in these microbial host systems. So one of the very highly successful example of heterologous engineering in microbes is again engineering of artemisinin pathway in yeast. So this is a different timeline where they engineered the yeast for production of this artemisinin. So initially they targeted 9 malonic acid pathways, and they could achieve about 40 grams of amorphodiene, which is the precursor for artemisinin. So then over the next several years, they did a lot of different engineering strategies, and finally they could achieve 25 gram per liter of artemisinic acid, and which is finally converted to artemisinin. So this is one of the highest production of secondary metabolite in yeast system so far. And using these technologies, they started a company, and they started providing the this antimalarial drug to African countries. Another example of heterologous engineering in microbes is E. coli, engineering of E. coli for production of taxadiene. And this Taxol, as I mentioned in initial slides, Taxol is an anti-cancer drug, and this is produced only in this particular tree species, Taxus brevifolia, which is also called as Pacific yew, which is found in the sorry about it. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this Taxol is produced in this Pacific yew, which is found in the North America, and it takes about 750 kg of dry bark to produce 1 gram of this Taxol. And this 750 kg is like from almost like 1 to 2 trees. So once you take out the bark, the tree is not going to survive. So it's kind of, you have to sacrifice the entire tree to isolate this 1 gram of Taxol. So, and because of that, this tree species is like rapidly diminishing, and they wanted to come out with an alternative for this. So what the scientists from MIT Boston, they did was, they did 2 types of engineering, upstream module and downstream module, where in upstream module, they engineered the MEP pathway, which produces the precursors. And in the downstream module, they engineered the taxadiene synthase along with geranyl diphosphate synthase, which provides the first precursor for Taxol production. So by doing this, they could achieve production of almost 1 gram per liter of E. coli, this taxadiene. Taxadiene then they semi-synthetically converted to Taxol because the entire pathway is still not known. So this is almost like 1,000 times increase in the production of taxadiene compared to earlier engineering strategies in E. coli. So you can see the strength here that 1 gram of Taxol from 2 trees, and which is almost 300 to 400-year-old tree, and here in 1 gram per liter in maybe in 2-3 days time. So another example, best example is production of isoprene, which is the simplest terpene. They have achieved almost 24 gram per liter of isoprene using different engineering strategies in yeast. Also, you also know that cannabis, it is also called as ganja, if it is having high THCA. So this is THCA content. If it is 0.3 and more, it is called as ganja, or it is marijuana. If it is less than 0.3, it is called as medicinal cannabis. So engineers, researchers have deciphered the entire pathway, and now they have introduced into yeast system where they can control the production of cannabinoids as well as THCA, which can be either used as a psychoactive drug or it can be used as a medicinal cannabinoids. So this table shows some of the best examples of production of secondary metabolites. You can see most of the highly producing molecules are from the sesquiterpenoid class, where they have achieved almost up to 130 grams per liter of farnesene, and most of these are successful stories are again in the terpenoid class, because that is the well studied pathway, so they could achieve very high production of these molecules. Like in phenyl propanoids and alkaloids also people are trying, but are not so successful stories so far. But I think over the next several years, I think there will be more success stories to hear from other classes of secondary metabolites. So this is a timeline of examples of notable yeast produced secondary metabolites. So here, like you can see, around 2006, there was engineered 4 enzymes to produce artemisinic acid, and then it went up to 7 enzymes, and then 10 enzymes in around 2013, and then 14 enzymes, finally 16 enzymes. Now they have achieved engineering of 25 different enzymes to produce noscapine and halogenated derivatives, which are like anti-cancerous molecules. So this is kind of now, because of ease of synthesis of these genes, you can generate constructs with a lot of genes, and you can engineer the pathway. So these are some of the companies who are commercially producing these secondary metabolites using the microbes. So Evolva is a Swiss-based company where they are producing Nootkatun from this is grapefruit derived molecule, and vanillin, of course, all of you know vanillin is derived from vanilla pods, and valensin from oranges, resveratrol from grapes, and stevia sweetness, artificial sweetness. So they're all being produced in yeast system, and they have a plant in near Chennai also, where they are producing these molecules and commercially selling it. And again, like Amyris is a US-based company where they are producing artemisinin as well as beta farnesene, which is also a sesquiterpene, using yeast as a model system. And Manus Biosynthesis, like they are using this technology where they are producing taxadiene in E. coli, and then this taxadiene is semi-synthetically converted to Taxol, and they are supplying it to various pharma companies. So I have shown various examples, but it looks very easy, but it is quite challenging to achieve the production of target molecules in a sustainable and feasible manner. So first and foremost challenge is to have a complete understanding of the pathway. Whether you want to engineer the homologous system or heterologous microbe, you need to have a complete understanding of the pathway as well as different factors involved in regulation of the pathway. And of course, one has to have a, if you have to engineer the plant, you have to have a tissue specific understanding of the pathway, transition factors involved in the control of the pathway, and rate limiting steps, precursor flux in the pathway, whether it is cytosolic or plastidial, and also various branch points in the pathway. All this needs to be thoroughly studied before attempting for going for secondary, metabolic engineering or synthetic biology. And also one has to balance the primary and secondary metabolism, because if you take out the flux from primary metabolism, the growth of the organism will be affected. Thereby, you may achieve higher production of secondary metabolites, but there will be less biomass. So you may not get feasible amounts of secondary metabolites. So for example, here in our own study, we wanted to achieve higher production of monoterpenes in the tobacco. So we introduced one particular step where we increased the production of the precursor, initial starting precursor, that is GPP, using GPP synthase. So when we introduce GPP synthase, and GPP synthase utilizes the precursors which are required for both primary and secondary metabolism. So what happened was, like when we introduced the GPP synthase, the entire flux from primary metabolism was pulled towards secondary metabolism. And though we achieved higher production of monoterpenes, you can see that the plants were highly stunted and they were albino in nature. The biomass was totally affected. So this similar thing may happen in the microbial system also. They may start growing slow, or they may not grow at all. So one has to have a proper balance between primary and secondary metabolism to achieve feasible production of secondary metabolites. So, and also we have to know what is the good platform or the best platform for production of our secondary metabolites. So it can be whole plant or hairy root culture, cell culture, or it can be microbes like E. coli, yeast, or even lately people are trying to produce secondary metabolites in photosynthetic microbe, but it is still in a very early stage. So far, not much success has been achieved in photosynthetic microbes. So that was about the general introduction, as well as different strategies of metabolic engineering and synthetic biology. So now I hope I have another 15 minutes. I'll try to cover some of the work that we have done in our lab towards understanding of pathways and metabolic engineering of specialized metabolites in selected maps. So this is a periwinkle. I think all of you would have seen this plant, very commonly grown plant. And the botanical name of this plant is Catharanthus roseus, and it belongs to Apocynaceae. And this is a very unique plant because it produces more than 130 alkaloids. And among them, vinblastine and vincristine, which are produced in the leaf, they are used in the treatment of various cancers like breast cancer, lung cancer, and so on. And they were identified in 60s, and in the 80s and 90s, they used these molecules to semisynthetically convert them to vindesin and vinorelbine, which are also used in the treatment of these cancers. And the roots of this plant also produce another alkaloid called as ajmalicin, and it is used in the treatment of hypertension. And especially the vinblastine and vincristine, they are accumulated in very low concentration in the leaves, almost 0.002%. So it requires almost 500 to 1000 kg of leaf to get 1 milligram of this compound. So you can imagine how much cumbersome to extract these molecules. So because of that, they are highly expensive in the market. So scientists have been trying to understand the pathway leading to the formation of these compounds over several years, so that we can enhance the production of these molecules. So far, it is known that this pathway involving the production of these molecules involves almost 36 or more than 36 enzymatic steps spread across various cellular and subcellular locations. And streptozidine is the central intermediate for all the downstream alkaloids. So various biochemical reactions lead to production of catharanthine and windolin, which are monomeric precursors of this vinblastine and vincristin. These two get dimerized to form vinblastine and vincristin, which are the anti-cancer molecules. And this streptozidine in the root, it is used for the formation of ajmalicin. So the streptozidine is again formed by the condensation of indole moiety tryptamine and terpene moiety secologonine. That's why the name terpene indole alkaloids. So the tryptamine is derived from tryptophan by the action of tryptophan decarboxylase, and this tryptophan is in turn derived from the indole pathway or shikimate pathway. Whereas the terpene moiety secologonine is derived from geraniol, monoterpene geraniol, and geraniol is derived from GPP. GPP is in turn derived from IPP and DMAPP, which is the precursor for both primary and secondary metabolism. Over the last several years, though we say that more than 36 enzymatic steps, still many of the steps are not identified, and researchers are trying very hard to complete the pathway. So over the several years, they have been trying to enhance the production of these molecules in cell cultures or in whole plant level. So initially, they tried overexpressing this tryptophan decarboxylase and also streptozidine synthase, and also some of the identified downstream genes, but that has yielded very little success in terms of higher production of vinblastine and vincristin. And also over the years, researchers have found that it is not the indole moiety, but the terpene moiety, which is limiting for the formation of vinblastine and vincristin. So what we hypothesized was the early steps, early branch point involving GPP synthase and the subsequent enzyme involving conversion of GPP to geraniol by geraniol synthase. These two steps could be limiting in this plant. So thereby they may be affecting the production of vinblastine and vincristin. So we wanted to identify these genes and characterize. So we used this medicinal plant genomics resource database, where they have a very good repository of different transcriptomes. So using that database, we isolated and functionally characterized these two genes, and we showed that they are indeed limiting. And once we characterize, then we ask the question, can we increase the accumulation of alkaloids by overexpressing these two genes? So then we introduce the genes individually as well as in combination through agrobacterium mediated transformation into the plants. And when we introduce them, we not only observed increased accumulation of secologonine, which is the terpene precursor, it also increased the accumulation of ajmalicin, catharanthine, windolin, and finally increasing the accumulation of anti-cancer drug vinblastine. And this work has been published in various different publications. We could achieve almost twofold increased accumulation by just introduction of these two genes. So it showed that the study showed that it is possible to enhance the production of the anti-cancer drugs with a rational engineering. So if we now subsequently, if we increase the production, increase the expression of subsequent genes, we can increase much higher level of the vinblastine accumulation in these periwinkle plants. So another plant which we are working is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is botanically called as Withania somnifera. So here, this plant is it produces more than 40 different withanolides, and they are known to be produced both in all the organs like the leaf, roots, fruits, and also in stem. And these are some of the major withanolides produced from this plant. And you can see that most of the Ayurvedic formulations, they have this with the ashwagandha roots as one, roots or leaves as one of the component, and they have both leaf extract as well as individual vithanolides. They have been shown to have various pharmacological activities ranging from antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, immune modulator, antioxidant, antiviral, and so on, even like anti-cancerous also. So the biosynthetic pathway for these vithanolides are not well understood, and it is only known that they are derived from phytosterol pathway, and beyond phytosterol pathway, it is not known how many steps are involved in production of vithanolides. So in the absence of biosynthetic pathway, what we thought was to enhance the production of vithanolides, use of transition factors would be a good idea. So because the pathway elucidation will take a very long time, so what we wanted to identify transition factors which can regulate the biosynthesis so that we can enhance the production of these vithanolides. So using the transcriptome data from the in-house generated data, we identify a particular transition factor. Warki is a class of transition factor which is involved in providing tolerance to the stress, biotic stress and also abiotic stress. So we identify a particular candidate and we wanted to functionally characterize Implanta. So for that we established a Implanta assay which involves like virus mediated silencing. So it is called as virus induced gene silencing. So here, like using this approach, we could so here we have silenced phytoenzyme desaturase, which is involved in chlorophyll biosynthesis. So you can see that when we silence, this is silencing in different degrees, and you can see that the leaves have turned albino because there is no formation of chlorophyll. So this approach was used to characterize the identified Warki. Before going for Warki characterization, we wanted to see whether this approach can be utilized to study vithanolides biosynthesis. So we targeted squalene synthase, which is one of the first committed enzyme for the triterpene production. These vithanolides are nothing but triterpenes. So when we silence this gene, we not only reduce the accumulation of squalene, but also it resulted in reduced accumulation of vithanolides, indicating that yes, this strategy can be utilized for studying vithanolides biosynthesis. So next we use the same strategy to downregulate the identified Warki, and we observed that when we silenced Warki, there was a stunted growth in the plant. These are the control and these are the silence plants. You can see the degree of silencing correlated with the stuntedness of the plant. So further, we hypothesized that this Warki could be involved in also phytosterol biosynthesis because phytosterols are required for the normal growth and development. So we analyzed the vithanolides using HPLC, and you can see most of the vithanolides were significantly downregulated in the silenced leaves, resulting also in downregulation of most of the biosynthetic pathway genes of phytosterol biosynthesis, and also reduced accumulation of phytosterols. So then we transiently overexpress this Warki in leaves, and we could see the opposite effect to that of silencing effect. You can see increased accumulation of different genes of the pathway, and resulting in increased accumulation of phytosterols and also vithanolides. Further, since these vithanolides are involved in defense, and also these transition factors are involved in providing defense against stress, we also check the expression of the pathogenesis related genes in the silencing background, which resulted in which showed that there was a significant downregulation of these pathogenesis related genes, resulting in reduced tolerance to the bacteria Pseudomonas syringae in the silenced leaves, also reduced tolerance to the fungus growth. This is controlled. This is silenced, Warki silenced leaves, where you can see much higher growth of the fungus, Botrytis cinerea, and also the insects feeding assay also showed that the silenced leaves were preferred by the insects compared to the control. So this showed that Warki has positive regulatory role on phytosterol and vithanolides biosynthesis and defense against biotic stress, highlighting its importance as a metabolic engineering tool for simultaneous improvement of triterpenoid biosynthesis and plant defense. So this now can be used for overproduction of vithanolides in callus or cell suspension culture, or in transgenic plants, or in hairy root cultures. So in addition, we are also working on aromatic grasses to study the, here you can see these are the 3 different species. Although they are of same genus, they produce different profile of monoterpenes. So this is aldehyde rich, this is lemongrass, which is aldehyde rich, and we have Pomarosa, which is alcohol rich. Geraniol is a major component, and we have intermediate type, which is citronella grass, which has both alcohols as well as aldehydes and also acids. This is geranic acid and citronellic acid. So we wanted to study how this variation is happening. So we used the transcriptomic approach, and we found that transcriptome contained mostly, it is highly represented by the genes of terpene biosynthesis, which is of course very much expected. And further, using the transcriptome, we have now proposed a putative pathway where these are the different steps, and these are the putative genes identified from the transcriptome. And we are now working on to characterize these genes. And once we know the genes exactly involved in each step, that can be utilized for further engineering. Another important work we are doing in our lab is engineering of sandalwood oil biosynthesis in yeast in a BIRAC funded project. So as I mentioned in, I think earlier, the sandalwood oil, it takes about 16 to 20 years to produce 6 kg hardwood, and it yields about 0.2 kg of oil per tree. And because of this, it is highly priced in the market, about 2 to 3 lakhs per kg of the oil. So what in the year 2016, Canadian researchers, they deciphered the pathway, which involved 3 steps: santalin synthase, santalol synthase, and another supporting gene, which is reductase. So since we knew all these 3 genes, so we have proposed, and now we are doing the engineering in the yeast. So we have introduced these 3 genes, and by introducing these 3 genes, we could produce sandalwood oil, which is almost same as the oil derived from the tree, and we have achieved almost 150 milligram per liter of oil. And now further we are engineering the upstream pathway so that we can enhance the production to up to almost 2 to 3 grams. So if we achieve 2 to 3 grams per liter, it would be a really good achievement, so that it can be commercially exploited. Similarly, we are working on curry leaf. Here I will just quickly mention here that again, using the transcriptome approach, we try to identify the genes involved in the terpene biosynthesis. Again, the transcriptome was highly represented by the genes involved in terpene biosynthesis as well as alkaloid biosynthesis, because these curry leaves are also known for accumulation of carbazole alkaloids. And 2 genes were highly expressing genes were selected and expressed in the E. coli. Recombinant proteins were used for enzyme assay. And when we did the enzyme assay, we found that this MKTPS1 produced sabinein as the major product, which is a monoterpene, and this sabinein is the one which we smell when we smell the curry leaf. So I think all of you would have smelled the curry leaf. Whatever the smell you smell, that is sabinein. So we identified the gene for that, and then we also identified another gene, MKTPS2, which converted FPP to farnesene. And now this farnesene, alpha farnesene, has a role as an insect repellent. So we are trying to overproduce this farnesene by engineering in the yeast. So this is an industry collaboration where they want alpha farnesene to sell it as an insect repellent. So take home message from my talk is study of MAPS is very important, as they are the source of drugs and other useful natural products. And understanding the biosynthesis and regulation of specialized metabolites facilitates rational metabolic engineering or synthetic biology. Pathways for a number of specialized metabolites of medicinal and aromatic importance have been deciphered and engineered for commercial production. And though a reasonable amount of work has been done so far, a lot needs to be understood and explored in terms of pathway understanding and engineering for many important secondary metabolites. And of course, I thank all the funding, got funding from CSR, SAR, DBT, BIRAC. And of course, thank you all for your patient listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir, for that valuable talk. Participants, if you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can post it in the chat box.
Any questions?
So we have a question.
Yeah.
Are there any simulation softwares which can be used in metabolic engineering?
So that is called systems biology. So of course there are, I mean, you need systems biologists for that. There are not publicly available softwares, but the systems biology people can, of course, simulate. Suppose if you increase particular step, what will happen to the downstream steps? So all that simulation people do it. And for example, in the artemisinin engineering in the East, that's what they have done. Like over several years of different engineering approaches, finally they simulated and finally they achieved 25 grams. So as far as I know, there are no softwares available, but it can be done with the help of system biologists.
So we have another question from Dr. Suresh.
Yeah.
He asked, while you were expressing eukaryotic genes in E. coli, have you overcome any promoter issues?
So we do not use promoters from the eukaryotic system. We use only the genes. The promoters will be from the host itself. So we use, suppose if you are using E. coli or yeast, we use E. coli or yeast specific promoters only for that.
Salma madam, I will ask directly the question.
Yes, ma'am, you can, please.
Okay, sir, my question is different. It's not related to your talk. I am from EC background. So I am asking one question that suppose if we have to do artificial intelligence for any crop or disease, so where I will get the, where in the reservoir I will get the image of so many images I will get, so that I can train the model which I have for AI. You were showing some flower and plant. So no, just I'm asking out of my curiosity. For skin cancer and all, I got it from the California reservoir. Skin cancer patches I got. They were having 10,000 patches. More number of patches are there, more accuracy I can bring into picture. So like this, if I want for plant disease to find out, or wheat or anything, so my I was doing literature survey, but I am not able to know that where is the reservoir for the plant type of things, this disease photo image.
No. Yeah. That's a very good question and a curious question. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm not aware of any database like that, but yes, it is I mean, there could be some repository, or I mean, people use some imaging from the satellites, but I don't know whether that can be used for crop diseases. But to be frank, I don't know what.
Yeah, no, just I told you that out of the question.
Yes.
Because
No, actually, sample depository is there, but as far as image depository is concerned, you have to take physically the photograph of the image. I mean, photograph of the plant, diseased plant. Then only, because you have to take the photograph of the diseased plant in different conditions. Because
Yeah.
same symptoms, sometimes it
that
will come with nutritional deficiency also. So you should be able to differentiate between those two. Then only you can take that as a, criteria for segregating your diseases. Because
Yeah.
sometimes the symptoms will get mimicked. Bacterial infection also will give the same kind of this thing. Fungal infection and viral infection, there will be different kind of infections. And same sometimes nutritional deficiency also will lead to symptoms. And it varies from environmental condition to, I mean, soil type to one region to another region. So considering all these points in mind, we have to take the physically, we have to take the photographs. No depository is available for that.
Yeah.
but it will take a lot of time. So if it is there,
Definitely.
it will
No,
be
you
easy.
have to visit the field. You have to visit the field and you have to take the photograph.
Even if you take a photograph, you have to confirm what disease it is. Then only it will make sense. Otherwise, it will be of no use. So, like the experts may involve in that, and then if they create a repository, then it will be really a good this thing actually.
Or else artificially we have to infect and you have to take the photographs.
Yeah.
Dr. Salma, can I have a question?
Yes, sir.
Please.
So we have Dr. K.S. Jagadish with the next question.
Dr. Dinesh, let me congratulate you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
A great deal of work you have done by you and your team. Congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a small question in the sense that do you by now have any technologies or genotypes which can be commercialized? Because in the audience, some of us could be prospective entrepreneurs. So they would be eager to know the output or the product available from SIMAP.
Yeah.
Second question, kindly briefly explain your technology transfer center, the details, how it is functioning, what are the other technologies which are already in the pipeline or already released, such information. It will be useful to prospective entrepreneurs.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir.
So regarding your first question, whether any genotypes available, we have a lot of varieties which are bred through classical breeding, not through biotechnological approaches, because biotechnological approaches takes much longer time. So we have n number of varieties in medicinal and aromatic plants. Like if you take lemongrass, we have 3-4 different varieties, Krishna, then we have Simmatal, Simkaveri, all that. All this information is there in our portal website, simap.rest.in.
Very nice, very nice.
And like we have variety in species wise as well as crop wise variety. This thing is available in the website. Regarding the second question, that is products. Again, we have several products made by our scientists from Lucknow. In Bangalore Center, we are not involved in making any products, but several products are made in Lucknow and they are also available for transfer. And it is, if you are interested in any of the products, you can go through our website and the details is there, and also the cost would be there. If you want to get any licensing of any product, you can write directly to director@simap.rest.in. So then we can take it further. So it is all there in the website for you to.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
I hail from Western Ghats, that is Sirsi. Many of the farmers are interested in cultivating medicinal plants, which yield higher quantities. So as you mentioned, you already have some genotypes or varieties of lemongrass, etc.
Yeah,
Maybe I would like to visit your center once, sir. So
please, you can
we'll
visit
have a
anytime,
detailed discussion then. Yeah.
anytime during Monday to Friday from 9
Yes.
to 5:30. You can visit.
Yeah.
And generally, growing of medicinal plants, it is slightly tricky compared to aromatic plants, because
Okay.
medicinal plants, like, you have to have a buyback arrangement with any company. Whereas aromatic plants, anybody can grow and have a like oil extraction, and oil can be sold to anybody. There is demand for that. But medicinal plants, you have to have a buyback arrangement. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You may also have some links with marketing agencies, na? You
Yeah,
may
yeah,
have.
yeah. That is there. Yeah, that is there.
Okay.
That-
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdish sir. Any other participants with questions? Thank you, Dinesh sir. Those were the questions and discussions. So on behalf of the students, staff, management of the Department of Biotechnology, Oxford College of Engineering, I take this as a privilege and heartfelt gratitude for you to have accepted and graced this session and enriched all of us with valuable knowledge. Thank you, sir. Hoping to maintain this relationship further. Thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Thank you very much for some message out of my talk. So it is just like
Thank
privilege.
you, Dr. Dinesh. Thank
Yeah,
you for accepting and coming here to deliver your valuable lecture. We'll be in touch with you for further communication and collaboration.
sure, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Manjunath. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Take
sir.
care.